It's good to be here, and I hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas or holiday or whatever it is that you celebrate. David, you always use this word, and I can't think of what it is. Synchronicity, is that the word you use?
Yeah, that's
okay.
it.
Because I'm going to mention bells a little bit in my talk, and Susan picked the music, and we didn't really communicate on that, so she picked a song about bells. And I'm going to also mention things about New Year's resolutions, and Randy already did something with that. So all the stars aligned, and everybody's thinking was along the same path today. So welcome to the season of more or less. We resolved to do more of this and less of that. You could be wanting to change a habit you have, or an attitude you have. You might want to improve your attitude or drop a habit. But this is the time of year when we make resolutions about things we want to change in the coming year. Before we talk about the next coming year, I want to do a short review of our Open Door Fellowship this past year for us. I've got some pictures up here, and I'm going to point to them. I hope, can you see the red dots? Okay. This year was, I believe, a wonderful year for our church this past year. We're meeting in a new building. We don't own it, but we're in a new place, and it's a little better suited for our needs than the previous building. We've acquired over $50,000 towards our own purchase of our own building whenever we find the right place. We've added 6 new members to our fellowship. We've begun a video program. We helped a friend of our, a member with furniture that was much needed back in the spring. We've had peppermint or candy cane communion that Barbara had held for us. We've participated in the Multicultural Festival in August. We've helped numerous people with food and food baskets throughout the year. We've had flower communion. We've had water communion. We've rewritten and developed a new covenant. We've elected a second board. We move ever and ever closer to being part of UUA. Little by little, step by step, we're getting there. We took big strides this year. We went caroling and ministered and helped people in nursing homes and other people. We started a meditation group. We have a discussion group on Sunday afternoons. We've instituted our child care program and adult and youth RE programs. We said a short goodbye to Mary McCulley, who we hope will be back with us very soon. We celebrated our 2nd anniversary as a church. And we did a bon voyage to Tom Gaston, and I believe that he's been with us through all of the changes and the growth that we've made in the past year, and I think he knows about it, and he's with us in that. So overall, I believe we've had a wonderful church year, and I'm looking forward to what can happen in next year and the years to come. I want to talk a little bit about bells for a moment. Bells generally tell us when something's about to change. It's time to do something. We have school bells. There's Christmas bells at all the stores and bell ringers to draw your attention for donations for the Salvation Army. We put bells on our pets' collars because we want to know where they are, just for their safety. There's cowbells. So bells are a big part of Christmas and the Christian tradition. The night that Princess Diana died, that next morning, the bells thundered over London, alerting them that something had happened. So bells alert us to change or something that we need to pay attention to. It's a Wonderful Life is probably my favorite movie. And you might think it's a little hokey or cheesy or whatever, but every year my mother and I would watch this on Christmas Eve. It was a tradition. And she's been gone 9 years. But every year I watch it, and I can't help but think about her as I watch the same things over and over again. And I cry at the same parts every year. And I got to thinking, you know, George Bailey had a wonderful life. And I was thinking, what made him have a wonderful life? Is there a way that I can be more like George Bailey? And I realize he's a fictitious character. Is there a way that I can incorporate some of his attitudes or behaviors into my life? Are there ways we can do these as a church that would help us to have a wonderful new year? One of the lines in the movie, of course, is the Christmas tree bell rings, and Zuzu says, "Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings." So something happened every time a bell rings. I want to make some points today, and just as a way to be mindful so that what we say or talk about doesn't go in one ear and out the other, which I have a propensity to allow that to happen. After each point, I want to ring a bell just slightly, and then just take a pause to think about that point before we move on to the next one. So, what did George Bailey do to have such a wonderful life? And how can we have a wonderful new year? For one thing, George Bailey had big dreams. He grew up in a small town, but he wanted to go places. He wanted to build skyscrapers. He wanted to see the world. You know, it's been said that you only hit as high as you aim. Aim higher than what you want. Chances are your arrow might be a little low. And I know we have big dreams for our church, and that's good. The higher our target, the higher our achievement will be. That's one thing George Bailey had. He had big dreams. Whether he realized them or not, or he attained them, they were there, and they gave him hope, and they gave him something to look forward to. So to have a wonderful new year, have big dreams. Another thing George Bailey did was he did the right thing and he accepted the consequences. Maybe I'm sure most of you have seen this movie at least once.
10 times.
10 times, 100 times. George Bailey knew what Mr. Gower did by putting the poison in the pills. He could have just done what he was told and took the pills to the family that was sick, but he didn't. Now he was in a dilemma. He went to see his dad. Couldn't get any help from his dad because his dad was busy. But he did the right thing. He didn't take the pills. I can't help but think George knew when he got back to Mr. Gower's store, there was going to be some kind of consequence. He would be in some kind of trouble. There's different versions of the movie. And in the one version of the movie, you can see George come loafing up the street back towards Mr. Gower's store. And I believe it's because he knew he would be in trouble. Because Mr. Gower wouldn't know what the real situation was with the pills. I think to have a happy life, to have a wonderful life, you do the right thing. And we all know sometimes there's consequences for doing the right thing. But he did it anyway. The next thing George did is he wanted to understand. Mr. Gower lost his son. He was in the military and he lost his son. He realized that Mr. Gower's attitudes and moods and the way he was behaving was directly related to that event. I think it was St. Francis or somebody that said, "Seek first to understand before being understood." He realized why Mr. Gower was behaving that way. It's real easy to look at what somebody does or what they say and just take it at face value and not think about why they did it or what was the underlying cause of what they did. But instead of just being angry, George sought to understand why Mr. Gower was behaving the way he does. So in order to have a wonderful life, seek to understand why. Another thing George was is he was trustworthy. After Mr. Gower realized what he had done by putting the poison in the pills, of course he was very sorrowful for how he had treated George. But George never told a soul. He knew what that would do to Mr. Gower's reputation, what it could possibly do to his business. And he kept a secret. You know, we all like to think there's somebody we can tell something and it won't go anywhere. But there's somebody trustworthy. So to have a wonderful life and a wonderful year, try to be a trustworthy person. Have a wonderful new year and a wonderful life. Extend a hand, not criticism. In this scene, Violet Dix came to George for money because she was leaving town. Doesn't really say why she was leaving town, but I'm under the impression it's because possibly she was pregnant, not married. It's kind of implied to me, and she thought she needed to leave town to avoid disgrace. Everybody knew what Violet Dix was like, and instead of judging her, George just sought to help her. She needed help and he extended it. You know, it's not my job for every person I see on the street that's homeless or needs a hand. It's not my job to try to determine why they're in that situation or to pass judgment on them. But I believe we're here to help them. That's what George did. So to have a good life, a wonderful life, and a wonderful year, extend a hand. Another attribute of George was that he had the best interests of others in mind. He saved his brother's life, and he helped stop a run on the bank that potentially, or I'm sorry, the building and loan, that would have run the building and loan out of business. He didn't go on a honeymoon, but he used what he had to help keep the building and loan open and to help those other town members. You know, it's been said that if you want to help yourself, help others. And we're all interconnected. And I think some of our principles, George Bailey demonstrated them. So if you want to have a good life, a happy life, a wonderful year, keep the best interests of others in mind. George accepted the strengths and weaknesses in others and himself. In this scene, after his father died, George is basically standing there admitting to the board and to Mr. Potter that his father wasn't a businessman. He's basically saying somebody else probably could have done a better job with this organization than my father did, but his father was a good man and wanted to help people. It's easy to see someone's weaknesses, especially if we're angry, if we've been hurt. But we need to learn to accept the strengths and the weaknesses of others and ourselves. Make us happy. And I think that accepting the strengths and weaknesses in ourselves and others will help us to have a happy year. George celebrated the blessings and achievements of others. His whole life was about helping people attain homes. Not mansions, simple homes. And he celebrated with them. It's easy sometimes to be jealous or wonder why I don't have something that someone else does. But George celebrated the good things in other people's lives with them. And they remembered that. He shared in their joy. I believe if we celebrate the blessings and achievements of others, we'll have a wonderful year. And George made the best out of a less than perfect situation. He lost his clothes in a swimming pool at the high school dance and had to go home in an old football uniform that didn't fit him, but he still had a good time with Mary on the way home. He also didn't get to go on a honeymoon, but ended up spending his wedding night in a rainy, leaky house that probably should have been condemned, but he was with Mary, and so it was all right. Every situation isn't always going to be perfect or pan out the way we wanted it to, but try to have a good attitude and make the best out of sometimes a not so good situation. And you can still have some enjoyment and have a good year. Another thing George did is he did not compromise his principles for money, power, or gain. He was tempted. He worked long hours every day. Mr. Potter was the richest man in town and offered him something, a package, a benefit package, a salary he couldn't believe. And for a short period of time, a few minutes, a few seconds, George was tempted to give into that. He had a home and family. Everybody wants to better themselves. But he came back to his right mind about a minute into the conversation. He was not willing to compromise what he believed to be right for his own personal gain. And George had faith in other people. The building and loan survived because the townspeople all had their money there. Someone else's money, my money might have been in Randy's house, or vice versa. Everybody came to get their money out of the bank, and George told them, we have to have faith in one another. They were reliant on one another to keep that facility open, otherwise they would lose everything. And in any church, or family, or organization, there needs to be faith in one another, trust in one another, and pulling together. And I think that's one of the things that led to George Bailey having a wonderful life, because he had faith in other people. Apparently it's playing a video there, and I thought it was just a picture. The other thing George Bailey did is he did all he could. When the money was gone, he looked everywhere, searched everywhere, did everything he could to find the money, the $8,000 that was going to send him to jail for being missing. He did all he could, and when he couldn't do any more, he asked for help. He wasn't prideful. He had said, I'm not a praying man. He wasn't necessarily a religious man, but he asked for help. I think that's an attribute, knowing when you need help and when you can do things on your own. If you want to have a wonderful life, don't be afraid to ask for help. George Bailey wanted to build skyscrapers and deal in multi-million-dollar companies and build bridges and see the world. That was his goal. But really what he did was help build the lives of other people around him. Some people, like Harry Bailey, his brother, who shot down a plane that was getting ready to crash into an aircraft carrier during World War II. Some people influence a few or many people in big ways. Politicians, religious leaders, people maybe in your company or organization or a church or wherever. Some people influence a few or many people in smaller ways. But generally, behind the people that make the big influence, there's generally people who are making small contributions, smaller influences that support the people that make the big influence. Harry wouldn't have been there if George hadn't been there. Either way, all the good we do is important, whether it's in a big way or a small way. I want you to take just a moment and to yourself think back over your past year and think about some good moments you've had. Is there anything anybody would like to share? Randy?
You know, I'd never seen that movie from start to finish until this year. I'd seen bits and pieces of it, but I'd never seen it all the way through. And I kind of thought, well, it's got a lot of sentimentality in it, you know. Every angel gets his wings when a bell rings or something. And I was a little bit turned off by that, but sitting and watching it all the way through and seeing the points that you brought out this morning made me really appreciate that movie. And I see why it's a Christmas classic now. It's one of